All right, everyone, so what happens when a nation's entire economy just collapses? Well, sometimes it forces a total reinvention. Today, we're going to look at a fascinating story of how a devastating financial crisis in Thailand actually gave birth to a pretty unique economic philosophy. It's one that makes you question the whole idea of endless growth. This is really a story about resilience and, finding a totally different way forward.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll set the scene and look at the crisis that started this whole conversation. Then, we'll really define the sufficiency idea. After that, we'll put it up against capitalism to see the contrast, check out the impacts of both, and we'll end with a big question for you to think about. What's the goal, wealth or sufficiency?
Okay, let's dive right in. To really understand any new solution, you have to first get a handle on the problem it was trying to fix. And for that, we need to go back in time to Southeast Asia in the late 1990s.
Now, take a look at this timeline. It tells a really powerful story of cause and effect. In 1997, you have the Tom Yum Goong crisis. A clever name, but it was a brutal financial meltdown that hit Thailand and then spread across Asia. It was a massive, massive wake-up call. And the response? Well, just 5 years later, which is incredibly fast for a national policy shift, the country officially adopted this completely different way of thinking. They baked the sufficiency economy philosophy right into their national economic plan. It's a straight line from total crisis to a radical new approach.
So now we know the why. The crisis basically forced them to find a new path. But what exactly is this philosophy of sufficiency economy? What does it actually mean? Let's break it down.
The best place to start is with the words of its originator, the late King Bhumibol Adulyadej. This quote gets right to the heart of it. See, at the time, the goal for many Asian economies was to become an economic tiger, aggressive, powerful, dominant. But he said, that's not what's important. What's important is a Bhumibol economy. That phrase Bhumibol roughly translates to having enough to live on. The goal here isn't power, it's stability. It's about being self-supporting, a deliberate choice, really, of stability over sheer strength.
And this is a really important clarification because it's easy to get the wrong idea. When people hear sufficiency, they might imagine a return to the past, where every single family has to grow their own food and make their own clothes. But that's not the point. That's, as he says, too much. The focus is actually on the community level, a village, a district. That's the unit that should be reasonably self-sufficient. So you build resilience locally.
Okay, so let's put a formal definition to this. The sufficiency economy is a philosophy built on 3 core pillars: moderation, reasonableness, and self-immunity. That last one, self-immunity, is just a cool way of saying you need to be resilient to shocks from the outside world, like another financial crisis. It's all guided by the Buddhist concept of the middle path, which is all about avoiding extremes. So put simply, it's about knowing what you're capable of and living within your means to build a strong, stable foundation for yourself. Now, to really appreciate just how different this whole approach is, we need to compare it to this system that pretty much runs the world. So let's switch gears for a minute and talk about the foundations of capitalism. And let's start with the absolute basics. The entire field of economics, at its core, is the study of one fundamental problem. We have limited stuff, resources, time, you name it, but we have seemingly unlimited wants. So economics is just the study of how to manage that problem. And what I find really cool is that the original Greek word literally means household management. Just think about that for a second. We've scaled up the idea of managing a household to managing the entire global economy. And if you're going to talk about modern economics, you have to talk about this guy, Adam Smith. He's considered the father of it all. But here's something really important to remember about him. He wasn't an economist in the way we think of one today. He was actually a moral philosopher. His ideas about the economy were deeply tied to his ideas about human nature, morality, and how society should work. You've probably heard this phrase before, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. It's maybe the most famous metaphor for capitalism. The idea is really simple. If the whole economy grows, if the tide comes up, then everyone benefits, whether you have a small rowboat or a giant yacht. This implies that the main goal should just be overall economic growth, because that growth will naturally trickle down and make life better for everyone. Now, this right here is the central and honestly kind of radical idea from Adam Smith's big book, The Wealth of Nations. He argued that if every single person just acts in their own self-interest, trying to make the most money or get the best deal for themselves, somehow an invisible hand guides all those selfish actions to create the best possible outcome for the nation as a whole. It's a pretty wild thought that individual greed could lead to collective good.
So how is all this wealth actually created? Well, Smith pointed to a key engine of growth: the division of labor. It's basically a 4-step recipe. You take a complicated job and you break it down into tiny, simple tasks. Then you have each worker specialize in doing just one of those tasks, over and over. That specialization makes them incredibly fast and efficient. And all that new efficiency means way more stuff gets made, which in turn grows the national wealth, or what we measure as GDP.
Okay, so every system has outcomes. Some intended, some not so much. So let's take an honest look at the impacts of the capitalist model. We'll look at the good stuff and some of the criticisms.
So what are the big selling points? Well, at its heart, capitalism is about freedom. The freedom to start a business, to choose your own path. And that freedom creates this incredible incentive to work hard and to innovate because there's a reward for it. For all of us as consumers, all that competition usually means better stuff and lower prices. And for a country, it's an engine for constant growth.
But of course, there's another side of the story. There are some major critiques. For one, the model is kind of built on the idea that humans are always rational robots making perfect decisions. And we know from modern psychology that's just not true. It also runs on this engine of unlimited wants, which, as one Buddhist proverb puts it, is like a craving that can never be satisfied. And that can lead to some serious social problems, loneliness, family issues, and it can push this idea that money is the only thing that matters, which can lead people to do some pretty unethical things to get it.
All right, let's pull all these threads together now. We've seen the history, we've gone through the definitions, we've looked at the impacts. So for our final section, let's put these two powerful ideas right next to each other and see how they stack up.
Okay, this slide really is the core of our whole discussion today. Just look at the contrast here. With capitalism, the goal is maximization, more profit, more stuff. It's driven by self-interest and competition, and we measure success by GDP growth. On the other hand, with the sufficiency economy, the goal is totally different. It's moderation, sustainability, and resilience. It's driven by reasonableness and the middle path, and success isn't just about money. It's measured by things like quality of life and self-reliance. They are just fundamentally different answers to that basic economic question of how we should manage our world.
And so this is the big question I want to leave you with. It's pretty clear that neither of these systems is perfect, right? Neither one has all the answers. So the real challenge for us as individuals and for our societies is to figure out the balance. How do we take the incredible engine of innovation and growth from one system, but also apply the wisdom of sustainability and moderation from the other? That's the puzzle for us to think about. Thanks for tuning in.